phone. Rick and I do Sunday gathering, 2-hour call-in gospel show on KTM 1400 every Sunday morning. Now he's done it for quite a while, but he called me one day and said he had to be out of town. Could I fill in for him? And I said, well, I'd have to come out and see what he did. So I went up. Sorry, he didn't do much. So then I went back a second time, and it's kind of grown on me now. I love the interaction with people. I love the gospel music that we've been putting out. But a little bit about myself. I started in weather 54 years ago. I was in the Air Force, and I became an Air Force weather observer. And didn't plan on it. It wasn't what I was going to go into, but it's what I ended up doing. And then Vietnam escalated, and they took 28 of us. We trained with the Army Rangers and went to Vietnam and built the Combat Weather Network over there. So I was combat weather, and I was going to get out of the military and decided I would stay. I loved the weather, and I loved the applications. It wasn't just 10%. We never used percents. We had to use weather for close air support, high altitude bombing runs, safety and protection of the troops in the heat and the lightning and all that weather can provide. And I stayed with it, and I'm still doing it. I do weather 7 days a week. I love it. I love the challenge of it. And I've often thought, you know, we talk about all the bad things that weather creates. The droughts we have, the tornadoes, the people that die, the destruction, the hurricanes. And I don't even pretend to understand God's strength and what He does and why things happen, but I accept it. And I always know, and I always say there's one thing in the Bible that I always truly fall back on. And it came to pass. It never says it came to stay. And I feel like that about the weather too. And so we get all of these bad things, but out of a lot of it is some good. A lot of it, while it seems bad, I think is caused by man, because man's always tried to improve on things. We've taken old creeks and streams and rivers, and we've built dams so we could pool water. And sometimes that's worked for us, sometimes it hasn't. The hurricanes are a massive transport of water. So while they scare everybody and can do a lot of damage, they're beneficial. We need them. When we go through a droughty period, I always tell people, don't be praying for rain, because everybody gets to pray, and not all your prayers get answered, but enough do that usually we'll end up with floods afterwards. So I just want one or two of you to pray. So don't everybody get together and pray for this thing. But weather is so powerful. We used to explain that one thunderstorm had enough energy in it to provide the energy needs for the United States for about 20 minutes. And that's the power of one thunderstorm. Lightning can be a danger 10 miles from the parent storm. So there's a huge amount of strength in everything that goes on with the weather. So I look at it as a challenge. I look at it as something that is from God. And I've taken some of the current things that man talk about, and I've given a lot of thought to it. And here's just one thing that I've noticed. You've heard so much talk about global warming and climate change. I'm not a big proponent in the way it's presented because there's so much more to just producing carbon dioxide. I've seen volcanic occurrences that have provided more carbon dioxide than anything man has done. We had a volcano called Krakatoa, changed the weather pattern of the world. And we had Pinatubo that helped provide us here in Texas one of the coldest winters ever. And it's from tracking volcanic ash that I had this thought process. If you remember, not that long ago, we had a thing called the ozone hole show up. The British came up with it first, and then NASA began to investigate. And first they thought we had thinned out the ozone due to our pollutants in a big portion of the world. They found out it was basically at the pole areas, North Pole and South Pole. So a little later, whenever a friend of mine that used to do weather with me on Channel 6 in the early 80s, we were tracking volcanic ash. And if you watch volcanic ash from one of these major volcanoes, you'll start spreading it around the world. Northern hemisphere, it goes round and round and round, and it lives higher and higher and higher in the atmosphere. And it changes its substance into a gas. And where does it pool? Around the poles. And so the ozone holes have expanded and contracted. And so I got to thinking, you know, it's like God gave us a porthole to protect us from the pollutants we put up there. Also, when they talk about global warming, here's the process that I think, whenever they talk about the ice cap melting, the water level going up, and us getting hot and can't sustain life like it does, in the most simple terms, if you add more water to this world and more heat, you'll create more evaporation. If you create more evaporation, you'll create more clouds. If you create more clouds, you'll reflect heat off the top of those clouds back into space and induce cooling. Also, if the water levels heat or the water heats up, it enhances the growth of phytoplankton. Phytoplankton cleans carbon monoxide out of the water and out of the atmosphere. So every time I look at something, I see ways that I think God has said, I've got to take care of some of the faults in some of these humans I've created. So that's the way I think about the weather, and that's what I'm all about. I try to do a good job forecasting. I don't make excuses about being right or wrong. Oh, wait a minute, I've never had to make one of those. But I do work at it, and I try to be accurate, and I saw that you have some warnings in here.
Yeah.
Tornado sirens, things like that. Well, see, we go on TV, and to me, it's always a lot of hype, like we're talking about, look at this severe, look at this, look at this. And I always tell people, if you're watching me, you're in the safest place you can be in Texas. We don't have basements, so if you're watching TV, you're pretty safe. It's the people that are out in it that can't hear us that are not so safe. But I think forecasting means ahead of time. So if we're going to have the severe weather, I always try to tell you a few days beforehand until you pick up loose objects around the yard, because a high wind can blow those objects through glass. A lot of our damage is done from broken and flying glass. Know where you're going to go. Have a plan. And know that the smallest room of the house, closet, something like that, away from windows, is the safest. Lightning's always the danger. Be inside or be in an automobile. And so I try to put out the things that will keep you safe ahead of time before it gets here. If the water's up over the road and you drive through it, hey, that's on you. That's not on me. The weather didn't do that. You did that. So that's what I'm all about. I want to make good weather forecasts, do a good job, and I'm now all about doing the Sunday gathering with Rick, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. Any questions for me about anything? I've done.
Yeah, we'll take a question if anybody has.
Well, I covered it all. Do you have a question? Oh, okay.
No.
But I think weather is one of the most fun, most challenging jobs anybody can do. I'm telling you, it's hard to put everything together because everything contributes to it. The world and the weather's in a constant state of flux. Everything moves. If it even heats a little bit, the heat rises. When the heat goes up, cool air comes in to replace it. If you have a mountain terrain, water or the moisture will go to it, try to go up over it. When the water gets up, it cools, condenses, and it rains. So you've got to figure out terrain, your moisture content, your wind, the curvature of the earth, everything comes into play. If there's no questions then, Rick, do you have a few words?
And you know, I think of that, when I consider the heavens, the work of thy hands, the sun, the moon, the star, we could add the weather. What is man that you're mindful of us? And the Son of Man,
exactly,
that he visits us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Rick, what do you have to say? He's not a weatherman, though.
Yeah. No, I'm not a weatherman.
No, but he gets out in it a lot because it's all about boats and water.
You know, I knew that I was going to have a great friend in Bill when I discovered he was a prognosticator, and I mispronounced that. But many years ago, I was at a meeting, and that was during the drought, actually, not the previous drought, but the one and before that, and they asked him, said, Bill, when is the drought going to end? He thought for a second, he came back, when it rains. And so I knew then that this is a man of much wisdom. But, you know, my thoughts are, God is such a wonderful God. He has given us the seasons. He's given us the change and the climate. How sad it would be if the climate didn't change. How sad it would be if the weather was always the same. I know sometimes in the spring we say, man, I wish it was like this every day. The flowers are blooming. We see God's handiwork in nature. We see God's handiwork in our lives. But we need those changes. We need the winter of our lives. We need the spring. We need the rebirth. Water. Gosh, think about water. Think about from the Bible how many times water is an important substance in the Bible. Look at all the heroes in the Bible that we have. Jonah, Noah, all of those. Think of the disciples. Many of them were fishermen. So water is so important. It is our true nature, a true thing that is given from God. So as you go from here, just keep in mind that God is a wonderful God, and Jesus taught us one thing, to love one another. And that's where we need to go as humans here in Texas, in Copper's Cove, across the nation and across the world. If we could just teach that one message. He's not a God of hate. He is a God of love. So I leave you with that thought. And
Thank you.
so
Thanks to both. Yeah, let's give them a hand. Thank you. We might have to have them back, you know, for a Sunday evening or something like that, okay? If you turn to your service folder, there it says Part 1, a weather warning. There's no more unnerving noise than the warning siren offering, announcing an approaching tornado. That siren is loud and annoying for a reason. It's extremely important that no one misses it or ignores it. There's a siren just as loud and annoying in the Bible. It's called the law. And it calls all of us to remember and come before God and know and recognize and confess that we are sinful human beings. And so, our confession, responsive, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
There is no one who does good, not even one.
Through the law we become conscious of sin.
Cursed is everyone who does not continue to do everything written in the book of the law.
Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner.
And the children will sing